Welcome. I'm Terry Kramer, the faculty director at the Easton Technology Management Center here at UCLA Anderson, and I wanted to welcome you on what is going to be a timely, interesting conversation about the role of technology and leadership in a changing environment. And it goes without saying that technology has affected almost every part of our lives today, as consumers, as business leaders, and in society more broadly. And technology-based innovation has offered huge opportunities for disruptions and challenges in almost every single sector that exists. We then would think about an overlay of COVID-19 on our experiences here, which basically in many industries is taking what would have been years of transformation and compressing them into a few months. And the whole idea about place, about where we shop, about where we work, about where we're entertained, et cetera, has fundamentally changed. All of this brings us to a very interesting issue and discussion around effective leadership. How do leaders think about a mental map to better understand where these opportunities and challenges exist? How do they think about technology and its role as an innovator? How do they think about competition and what it takes to win? How do they think about organizations and what skills and talent do organizations need in this environment? Now, I can't think of a better speaker than Maggie Wilderotter, who has an incredibly impressive set of leadership experiences across multiple industries, across multiple companies, and across multiple scenarios of transformation. She's a former CEO of Frontier Communications, where she led what was originally a regional telephone company with less than $1 billion in revenues to a national broadband voice and video provider with operations in 29 states, annualized revenues of over $10 billion. She was also the Senior Vice President, Global Business Strategy, and ran the worldwide public sector division at Microsoft. She was the Executive Vice President of National Operations for AT&T Wireless. She served on over 35 public company and 14 private company boards. She currently serves on the boards of Costco, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, Lyft, and is a board chair at DocuSign. She's a senior advisor to the Blackstone Group. She's also served on the President's National Security Telecom Advisory Committee as both vice chair and later as chair, with her term ending in 2014, and then served until January of 2017 on the President's Commission focused on enhancing national cybersecurity. With that background, first of all, Maggie, a big welcome to you. Great to have you with us.
Thanks, Terry. It's great to be here as well, except I'm tired now listening to all the work I had to do.
And Maggie has just come off of 3 board meetings to join us, so a special thank you for doing that. Now, in terms of the format that we're going to use, I'm going to ask Maggie a series of questions, and then we'll use Slido for a moderated Q&A. Just go to slido.com, slido.com, enter in the event code TECH21, and you can either enter in your own question or you can upvote an existing one. So Maggie, let me start out. We did a prep call a couple of weeks ago, and it was just fascinating, even though I've known you for quite a few years, listening during that prep call about your kind of leadership journey. You starting out as, I think what you said was an accounts receivable rep at Cable Data, leading you on to Frontier Communications, again, board chair at DocuSign, a whole bunch of luminary companies you've been affiliated with. Tell us about the leadership journey. Tell us about how you thought about success in those various roles.
Well, I had the privilege right out of college to move to the West Coast. My husband and I got married the same weekend I graduated college. So I'm always used to doing a lot in a very short period of time. And we got married in New Jersey. I graduated college in Massachusetts the same weekend. And then we flew to the West Coast because he's an Air Force Academy grad and he was in pilot training. So one of the things that I had to do was to find a job, and I wasn't in my zone of where I had a lot of contacts. So I did something that a lot of people don't know about anymore, and that is answered a newspaper classified advertisement for an accounts receivable supervisor at this new startup technology company in Sacramento, California, that was in the data center and data processing business and software, which was kind of this new horizon, this new field. And the intersection of developing these products for a nascent industry called the cable television industry. And this was back in 1977. So very early days of technology and cable. And I joined as the accounts receivable supervisor. I was at Cable Data for 12 years. I had 14 different jobs in that 12-year window, which really gave me a foundation to take my career constantly to a new level. So when I left the company after 12 years, we sold the company to a private equity firm. I was running the US, European, and Canadian operations for the business. And I had grown market share in that role over a several-year window from about 15% in the cable industry to 85%, and that was in the US and Canada. And we had about a 25% market share overseas in Europe. So it was a great experience for me. And I had a founder, an engineering founder who ran the company, give me opportunities in areas that I had no background in. And my philosophy was always do what it takes. Learn as you grow, pivot as you need to, and build relationships inside the company and outside the company where you can get help in order to be successful. But having an entrepreneur actually give that sponsorship to me early in my career was a great gift, and it was kind of a return on luck, you know. And the top 9 people in the company, 5 of us were women. And this is in the 1970s in tech. So, and the company was wildly successful. So Bob Matthews, the founder, had a great formula, but he really did give me the start of really turbocharging my career. When I was at Cable Data at 28 years old, I joined my first corporate board. Which was in the cable television industry. It was a cable television operator called American Cable Systems, headquartered in Boston. They had cable franchises around the country with big market share in Florida and on the East Coast, especially in Massachusetts. And it was a private company. It was 5 of us on the board. Within a year of joining that board, we took the company public. Then within another 12 months, we actually sold the company to who now owns it today. It's a Comcast property. But I had the great opportunity at 28 and 29 years old to join my first corporate board, but also be involved with taking a company public and selling a company in addition to that. And I went on 4 or 5 boards of directors of companies in the cable television industry during my tenure working in the industry. And board service, of course, was different in those days than it is today. But that gave me a great foundation. And over my career, I've always sat on several boards in addition to doing full-time executive work. But my career journey went from Cable Data, as you mentioned, into the wireless business because a number of cable operators also pivoted into wireless. And Craig McCaw started in the cable television industry. That's how I met him. And when he decided to start the Cellular One brand and build wireless networks to compete with the Bell operating companies, I had the opportunity to join early on. And I built the wireless networks in Arizona, California, Hawaii, New Mexico, and Nevada, and competed with the Bell operating companies in those states and grew substantial market share in the wireless world. We then sold the company after I was there about 5 years to AT&T. I stayed for 2 years as the executive VP. I ran operations for AT&T Wireless. And then I went back, I was up in the Seattle area at the time because that's where the company was headquartered. Then I came back to California and did a startup. I did an interactive television startup. I was one of only 4 women. I was like the 4th woman to take a company public in the United States. I took a technology out of a lab. I grew the market share of the product, and the customers were cable operators, equipment manufacturers from cable and wireless, and set-top box manufacturers. So I had good relationships already in that space from my cable and wireless days. But I took the company public. It had a $2.5 billion market cap, and then we sold the company to Liberty Media when Liberty did a roll-up of interactive television services. And that's when I basically left and went to Microsoft, working directly for Bill Gates for a couple of years. I remember when I got the call, it was right after I had sold Wink. He had bought Web TV not that long ago, so we were sort of frenemies in the industry. And when he called and asked me to come up there, I had been running a public company for several years. And I said to Bill, I said, well, Bill, I'd be happy to think about coming to Microsoft, but where are you going? So, because he was CEO at the time. And so we had a good laugh over that when he said he wasn't going anywhere. And to make a long story short, I wanted to go run another company, but I agreed to come for a year and help him with global business strategy. It was when open source software first started to compete with the software legacy products that Microsoft had. So I stayed for 2 years because then I took on the public sector for Bill and actually grew that business from to about a $5 billion business. And I hired my replacement, who was a woman as well. And then I went from there to run Frontier, which was a Fortune 1000 company at the time, and I took it over my 12-year tenure to a Fortune 500 company. And from Frontier, after retiring, I did pivot to more senior advisory services and board services, which is what I'm doing today. I sit on the 4 public boards you mentioned. I sit on 4 private company boards as well, and I do senior advisory work for a number of companies. So that's kind of the journey. And I'm a grandmother. I've got 3 grandbabies and 3 on the way. And I've got a terrific husband of, 46 years and 2 wonderful sons, daughters-in-law, and sisters and family. So
wow, congratulations and successes in multiple areas of one's life. Maggie, you had this unique experience of seeing transitions of industries and technology that has affected it. So you've gone from cable TV to landline communications to mobile communications to ultimately software. Tell us about the transitions and what made for the success of these industries, and where does it all go from here?
Yeah, I think, and we're seeing the transitions continue, right, in technology and accelerate as well. But one of the things that I had the opportunity and privilege to learn early on is I went to work with companies that were disruptors. They were changing the paradigm of the status quo, and they were taking on very large companies in order to do that. And what it taught me is that if you're a large company, that doesn't necessarily mean you won't be successful, but you have to be simple, you have to be nimble, you have to be willing to pivot and make changes. And big has a lot of benefits to it, but it also can have shortcomings if you don't run it more small within big. And I've seen that work extremely well for even companies that I sit on the boards of today. But I also think that I was able to go into greenfield areas. And as a woman in technology and leadership in those years, I didn't have a lot of that hierarchy you have in organizations that would stymie the ability to move up. We had so many things we had to do. We never had enough people to do it. And I think what I learned is even when I went to Frontier to run an 85-year-old telephone company that was a sleepy regional phone company and transform it into a voice, video, and data company, I brought the entrepreneurial ways of running a business to an old line business, which is why we were successful and why we grew. And I know even the last year I was CEO, we had an 85% TSR, the highest in the telecom industry for our returns to our investors. But I had a diverse workforce, and I had a diverse leadership team that actually mirrored our customers. At Frontier, 64% of our customers who made decisions on the products we sold were women in the household. And so my board, in the first 12 months of joining Frontier, I pivoted a 12 all-male board to a 50-50 board of women and men, 2 people of color, because I wanted our board to also be reflective of the customers we served. And within a year and a half, too, I had 50% of the executive leaders in the company were women working for me as direct reports. So I do think that I also simplified the business, created a strategy that was shared widely within the organization, gave opportunities for promotions from within, but also adding talent where we needed it. And really leading with a simplicity approach to driving share in the markets that we served. I decentralized the company, so all P&L responsibilities were at the local level, which I think is also something that large companies have to give that autonomy to people that are on the ground. And we weren't afraid to make changes when we had to do that.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Let me drill down on some of the technology piece. You've had a lot of years, you've worked in the mobile communications area. 5G now has been talked about. I was just listening earlier to Hans Vestberg's keynote address at CES, which was all about 5G. Tell us your view on 5G. Which applications do you think are most compelling? When do you think the timing is going to play out on 5G? All of that.
Well, I wish I did have a crystal ball on how it's all going to play out. But I do think that what 5G is going to enable us to do is really start to move data and distribute it to the edge of the network. Today, there's a lot of data that passes through the edge, but you don't necessarily have the radio technology in the G's before 5 that enables you to actually access data and manipulate data at the edge. It's pass through. That radio technology is pass through, and there hasn't been really any new radio technology developed in the wireless industry in 25 years. So this new technology that's coming out at the edge is one example is called O-RAN, and it is an innovative new radio technology that will enable manipulation of data close to where the data is gathered. So that'll reduce costs to keep data at the edge. It'll also make accessibility easier and speed of access easier for customers and partners. So I'm pretty excited about what 5G can do for the environment that we've become used to. But I also think that you look at the big players, you look at AT&T, you look at Verizon, Sprint, T-Mobile. These are folks that have done an amazing job in building capacity into their networks that really, if you think about the United States, enabled the entire United States of America to work from home and to have capacity in order to do that. And to balance that capacity, not just with work from home, but everybody blitzing on Netflix and Amazon Prime and, online shopping, et cetera. So the ability to have technology capabilities to edge and flow has been really important in the upgrades and the investments that have been made over the years in wireless. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Let me ask you about COVID, because you started to allude to kind of this new world that we're living in that's been relying on mobile, et cetera. What do you think will be the outcomes of COVID-19 in terms of how we live our lives? Do you see a new normal? How will that new normal play out? Will it change fundamentally industries, companies, products, et cetera?
Well, I do think that, COVID has accelerated digital transformation in all industries and in all sizes of companies. Where before digital transformation was more of a cost management approach, it's now competitive advantage. because as things have become distributed, it requires you to really upgrade, enhance, and change how you manage your business from an automation perspective, and how there's ease of use for your customers, ease of access to data. And I think a result of what has happened too is companies are collecting and storing, millions and millions of data assets today. And I think over the next several years, what we're going to see differently is companies are going to clean that data up. They're going to decide what data is really important and what data isn't. And they're going to use AI and analytics and computing in order to get insights from that data and to really transform how they do business. And that is what will drive consumers to have trust in those companies, to partner with them or not, and to utilize services or not. I think the consumers become very smart and discerning about where they spend their time. I think you're going to see consumers not just do business with companies because they have capabilities, but will do business with companies that they trust online. So I think trust will become a bigger factor. And I also think simplicity will really matter in everything that consumers and businesses do. Today we're still like our own individual IT departments as consumers. That's going to have to get easier and easier as you have more capabilities and you see more transactions and functions that'll take place at the edge. So I think we're in a transformation time. I think that acceleration has been positive. And I don't think we go back to what the normal used to be. I think we build on this new normal where we're going to have work from home. We're going to have work in offices and satellite locations. We're going to have more flexibility in terms of how we access data. We want convenience. So there's different standards in terms of how we think about convenience. But I also think that there will be times where we still go out to restaurants and eat, and we go to shows, or we go to events, or we go someplace for an experience for shopping versus just buying things online. So I think you're going to see this hybrid model develop, and how it shakes out, I think, will be different based upon different industries. I think we've learned a lot about remote healthcare during this whole period of time, and the infrastructure that's still not in place to distribute healthcare appropriately in the country. So, I think you're going to see medical change in fairly material ways in terms of applying these capabilities of online and data and software and services to accelerating treatments and vaccines and disease, curing diseases. So it's going to be a renaissance time as well.
Let me ask you then on that topic about this new normal driven by COVID-19 with on two specific companies where you sit on the board. One is Costco, obviously huge brick and mortar presence. The other one is Lyft, which had obviously ride sharing, et cetera. And I would think both of them have been affected pretty notably by COVID-19. What is your view about the impact of COVID and the new normal on both of those companies?
It is a great question. Costco, we're in the warehouse business. We have 800 warehouses basically worldwide, with the majority of our footprint in North America. We have an e-commerce business that has grown exponentially during this whole COVID pandemic. But I will tell you, the fundamentals of Costco, while they were challenged, and they were during this entire COVID period, because they were essential workers and they never got to shut down, where many businesses got to go to work from home and close their facilities. Our facilities had to stay open. And Costco's a very innovative company. It's also very disciplined, and it really took that innovation and discipline to a new level during this period of time. And as I mentioned before, one of the things of big businesses that are successful is they hire great people. They take amazing care of their employees, who then in turn at Costco take amazing care of the members. And that's what drives value creation and success. So one of the things that they did is the senior leadership and the board, we immediately put in place hazardous duty pay for all employees that had continued to work. We paid all of our 65 years old and older employees to stay home with full pay and full benefits. We added, capabilities for our employees in terms of getting to and from work, in terms of really changing some of the use of the warehouses in a different way to make them more safe and secure. We put plexiglass up at every single cash register. It's touch, with your credit cards. It's also senior hours we put in place. We have a lot of members that are 60 years old and older, and we put senior hours to open our warehouses an hour or so before everybody else comes. Because what was happening is the seniors were waiting in line. They can't go into a warehouse and rush to the back where the meat is as fast as younger people can. So they were missing out and not being able to get paper products or fresh foods. And so we tried to do a lot of innovation to balance what we were doing. In addition to that, we doubled down on delivery, same day delivery or 2-day delivery for groceries and for products and services. We expanded the capability of our e-commerce business. And because of that, Costco has grown exponentially during this period of time. Our membership is up, our retention rates are up, our sales have been up in many of the categories that we're noted for. And the innovation didn't stop on our merchandising. And so the resilience of a company like that in their culture is also a testimony to who they are and what they do. Our turnover rates for employees at Costco, you look at retail, it's about a 70% turnover rate typically in retail every year. If you take retirements out of Costco, we're under 5%. Our general manager and above is, I think the average tenure is over 25 years. So it is, and we've always paid above, minimum wage to folks that start at Costco, and we've always paid really well our employees, because that's where the business starts and stops for us. On the Lyft side, a tale of two cities. In those 2 weeks in mid-March when COVID hit the United States, our business dropped off by 85% in 2 weeks. Wow. So the two co-founders, Logan Green, our CEO, and John Zimmer, who's our president, are high values, again, resilient, not afraid to make the bold moves. We're really intentional about taking great care of employees, but also pivoting the business and reprioritizing what they were going to spend money on and how they were going to do that to get better runway. They continued to invest in the right areas of the business to build value and to take care of drivers and customers to make sure they stayed safe. The business has continued to recover. It's not back where it needs to be yet, but the recovery has been really positive. And at the same time, we've been committed to getting to profitability by the end of this year, the beginning of next year. So we've taken the right steps to raise money early on during the pandemic as well to give us more runway. And actually, Costco did the same thing. So did DocuSign. The company and HPE did as well. So all the companies that I affiliate with from a public perspective really tried to make sure they had enough runway because of all the uncertainty.
Excellent. You mentioned DocuSign. Let me ask you about DocuSign. Now, we cover in my technology classes what we call big bang disruption, something that is a better offer to consumers and lower price. Do you look at DocuSign that way and say, gosh, this is the future of companies and industries, a digital first company that is going to transform and potentially disrupt lots of others? Is that how you look at DocuSign?
I actually don't necessarily look at DocuSign that way. I look at DocuSign as a company that has the tools and capabilities to help companies digitally transform and to accelerate that transformation. DocuSign also has a huge TAM. Consumers use DocuSign. I think, I run into people all the time and they just, they're so thankful that they were able to sell their home or buy a home, right, through DocuSign.
Yeah.
We deal with small and medium businesses with an online capability where that's how we sell, is we sell DocuSign online to small and medium businesses. And then we have a very large sales force that sells to enterprise. We also are, with the, largest market share in what we call e-signature, right? As we all know, you get a document, you can sign it very easily. And over the last couple of years, we've pivoted the company to what we call a system of agreement. So it's a platform versus just a product. And the e-signature capability is one part of that new platform. In just the last couple of months, we've launched e-notary now online as part of that system of agreement. And we're doing CLM, basically document management on behalf of companies, where they can now store their documents, they can recall information from documents, they can take the major terms and conditions and repopulate any document with those terms and conditions to keep things keep it simple and to keep it consistent throughout an organization. And we're actually implementing these capabilities, not just in the traditional areas you would think of, like purchasing or legal, but in customer supplier relationships as well. So you can actually launch these types of products now in all facets of how companies do business. So we've had explosive growth with the digital transformation that customers are doing. And the other thing is we're a brand of trust. I affectionately refer to DocuSign as DocuLove, because people have used it, they love it. It's simple, it's easy, and it consistently works for you. And that you could be a business owner or an individual. And I think that capability has a huge potential to take it overseas as well, where we have a very small percentage of our business is international. And that's another opportunity set for us is to expand from our footprint in North America. And we're doing that as we speak in 3 or 4 facets of the world. So.
Excellent. Maggie, let me start taking questions from the audience. I don't think of all the events I've moderated, I've seen more questions and more upvoted questions. So I want to start getting through them. The first question, by the way, has got 31 votes behind it. I think I've seen them get as high as 10 or 15. This has got 31, now 32 votes. Women hold just 5% of CEO jobs in the S&P 500, yet firms with a female CEO have a better stock price performance. Why is there such a discrepancy? Are companies in essence laggards or boards laggards in identifying and placing more women in CEO roles?
Well, this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, that's for sure. I believe, and I'm a big advocate for moving women forward into those C-suite roles and into running companies. And I've always lived my career where I've got, God gave me 2 hands. I'm pushing myself forward with one, and I'm yanking a woman right behind me. And I do think, and especially the boards I sit on, I'm a big reminder or a conscience in the boardroom about the importance of making sure we do have diverse talent and that we do have women that get the opportunities to run companies. But it has to do with pipeline. It has to do with women being able to move up in organizations to get a breadth and depth of experience that would enable them to be successful in those roles. That's tough to find in a lot of traditional companies that don't have that capability because they haven't invested in it. And when they start to invest in it, it takes several years. Because as we all know, as you go up in your work experience to executive levels, there are less and less jobs, right? It gets to be a smaller opportunity set. And the last thing I'll say is women have to step forward and take the risks. I have done many jobs in my life that I had no clue about and I had no experience in, and I learned it on the job. And I think taking risks in your career, talk yourself into jobs, not out of jobs. I know a lot of my male counterparts, they do that like they breathe. But women have a tendency to look at our downsides and not necessarily our upsides. And I think we should pivot. When you pivot, you grow, you learn, and it's actually the most rewarding times in your career. And then you can take those learnings and apply it to other things that you haven't done before. And you start to build that capacity and that confidence in yourself. But I think that we're making progress. It's still slow. We're making progress also at the board level. That's still slow, but we're starting to get momentum, I think, in both camps.
Excellent. Next question, got 33 votes, 34 votes. What are the top two things that California legislators can do in order not to lose any more Fortune 500 companies to Texas, Tennessee, Nevada, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, I think that at some point you have to, the legislature has to represent the companies and the people that live in that state, and to not put headwinds in front of them that would force them to make decisions to leave the state. The taxes in the state are extremely high. They're talking about increasing taxes even further. I think the legislature and from the cities and counties all the way up through the state government have to streamline what they do. They have to get more efficient and effective because you can't spend money you don't have. And I think that accountability to the people that they serve every single day has to be apparent, not just in what they say, but in what they do. I also think that they have to look at helping businesses stay in the state and be more successful by doing public-private partnerships with companies and helping companies grow. Even companies that disrupt, they should help grow. Again, I'm a Nevada resident, but Lyft is an example of a board I sit on in California, and the fact that the government sued Lyft about the independent contractor status of our drivers and put Lyft and all of the gig economy delivery service companies in a position that we had to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to fight a bad rule and to show that the people don't support it. Those are the kind of things that, other businesses look at and say, well, when would that happen to me? So I think those partnerships are going to be important as well. But, businesses have choices now. With COVID, another acceleration is with work from home, people can work from anywhere. So you can move headquarters, you can change locations. It's not the same as it was before. And I think that vulnerability has to get recognized in the state of California.
Yep. Good. Next question. How do you deal with investors, especially when you manage a public company? And this really kind of gets into this broader issue of balancing long-term vision and corporate mission against short-term pressure from investors.
Well, I think you're always going to have that rub between short-term and long-term. I kind of equate it to how a pearl gets made. If you think about the oyster shell in the ocean, you've got sand and water rubbing together constantly to make that pearl. And I think companies have to do the same thing. We have to think, what do we have to do in the short term that will create value for the long term? And then we have to articulate that with our investor base. And we have to talk about what we're doing and why we're doing it, and what the value creation opportunity is. We also have to talk about what the risks are if we don't do those things. And I would say, last but not least, we have to talk to our investors not when we're in trouble, but we have to have a consistent dialogue with them. And that dialogue, it does take place on a quarterly basis when companies, especially public companies, do their earnings calls and their earnings releases. But it also requires building relationships with your key stakeholders and knowing what's on their mind from the short term and the long term. And I think by building those relationships, explaining what you do, how you do it, getting their feedback as to what's important to them, and making sure that we're responsible citizens and making commitments as businesses, on the ESG front, as well as on, the financial returns front, as well as doing right for our employees, our customers, our partners, and our ecosystems. And I think that you will get the support you need from investors by having those type of open relationships.
Excellent. Very helpful. There are two questions I'm going to try and aggregate here that have to do with the same thing about your secret sauce at pulling learnings from the environments you've been in. So one question is about, you work closely with Bill Gates. How did you learn from him that allowed you to succeed in other companies? Another question is, you work for both kind of traditional businesses, been board member of traditional companies, as well as kind of quote unquote tech or digital first companies. How do you learn to kind of glean things from each of them and be successful in what is a pretty diverse environment?
Well, I've had the privilege to work with and for a number of great leaders, Bill Gates being one of them. And what I tried to do with Bill is, and I think that all of us have these opportunities. Every person that we meet, people that we interact with, there's an opportunity to learn from them. There's also an opportunity for them to learn from you. I'm a very curious person. I ask a lot of questions. I think that what makes people tick and what makes people do things specific ways is very much of interest to me in understanding that success is not just a one-way street and it's just not one size fits all. There are multiple ways to get things done, and there are multiple ways to look at success. And with Bill, Bill is one of the smartest people on this planet and has been for many, many years. And to really look at that intellect of how he can look at something and see something very different than what I see. But that's not to say what I see doesn't matter either. And I think one of the things that I did with Bill is I have a lot of EQ, and I build very strong relationships with other people. And Bill is more of an introvert and actually is a technology genius, right? So when he had to be in a situation where the personal touch mattered, he relied on me to help him with that, where I relied on him to help on the technology vision and where things are headed. So one of the things that I've learned from working around and with great leaders is we all have things to contribute, and to know what we're good at, and to respect those that are better at other things, to have this combination to make better decisions over time. I think that's extremely important. And that's a gift. It's a gift that can keep on giving for all of us at all levels in our companies. But I also think that on the board level, I believe that repotting and having disruption and seeing around corners is really important. So I've always sat on private company boards and public, because they can operate very differently. And if you're a board member on a private company, you are more leaned in on the operations of those businesses. In public companies, there's a delineation of who runs the company, which are the executives in the company, versus the board does basically three things. The board, hires and fires the CEO, right? And supports the CEO when you hire him and you still like him, right? The board sets the strategy for the company, and the board makes sure the company is well governed. They're the three things that board members do on public companies. In the private world, it's different. The private world, they also cross that line into the operations. A lot of private company board members are big investors in those companies. So and these are companies too that in a lot of cases, and a number of the companies that I've sat on private company boards, they're new, they're nascent companies. They haven't developed a lot of that muscle of growth and scale. And so I go on boards, since I've run large companies and I've run small, I know the difference between large and small and how you get from small to large and do it well. And so I like that environment of working with young and new talent and disruptive capabilities that can transform and create value. But I also have a huge amount of respect for the companies that have reinvented themselves over and over again. Costco is a great example of that. I sat on the Procter and Gamble board for many years. They've done, huge reinvention. I look at, DocuSign and, the explosion of growth they're going through, and, with a CEO who is open to learning and listening and caring about doing things the right way, but he's managing scale that's exponential. Mm-hmm. So I think that variety, at least for me, has kept me learning and growing constantly, but also being able to give back in different ways.
Yep. Another question, DocuSign, like Zoom and Peloton, could be considered pandemic profiteers. Is that a fair criticism? And maybe I could also kind of say that once COVID is over, do you actually expect that some of these companies that have done so well during COVID are actually going to have a reckoning, and it's going to be much more difficult for them afterwards?
Well, I actually don't believe that DocuSign has been overt pandemic profiteers. I think DocuSign has benefited from the pandemic, but they also know that they've benefited from the pandemic, not because of anything that they did individually, right? Mm-hmm. At least at DocuSign. And, the culture at DocuSign is a very healthy culture. It's an employee culture. It's a customer culture. It's about doing well and doing good. And that has not changed one iota during this pandemic. We have taken great care of our employees, again, making sure that we're paying them appropriately. We have helped set up offices in everybody's homes. We have subsidized childcare and healthcare services. We have done mental health programs for our employee base. And we've stayed connected from an over-communication perspective and an availability of our leaders to their teams. So I look at how they've operated internally, and that has created an environment where their employee base has risen to the occasion to take great care of customers and to accelerate what they do in order to help customers be successful during this period of time. In addition, we've done a number of donations. We've done a number of partnerships with nonprofit organizations in terms of trying to help people that are in need and have issues. So while the company has been successful, we understand the responsibility of that success. And I think that's what I can't speak for other companies that have had windfalls during the pandemic, but as a board member, as the board chair, and as someone who really cares about customers, partners, our communities, and also our employees first and foremost, DocuSign has done a terrific job in checking those boxes and doing it with integrity and with caring and with sincerity.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Question on the gig workers, and this one specifically is the IRS kind of stuck with two classifications of workers, a 1099 or a W-2 employee? Why not create a third classification to serve the broader gig economy?
Well, it's a great question, and I think that's exactly what we're trying to do at Lyft. We actually just announced this week certain health and medical benefits for drivers. We do programs where we have, insurance capabilities for our drivers, the ability for them to make higher wages based upon where they work, how many hours they work, providing incentives to our drivers, paying them above and beyond, the minimum wages that they would work otherwise. So I do think that we're taking an accountability and a responsibility to have not just total independent contractor approach to life, which is what we've known in the past, and 100% employee, but an independent contractor step up that's in between that. And I think in the gig economy, we're going to see that matters. There's a lot of people that want to work at multiple companies, not just one. And having that freedom and flexibility is important. Our drivers, 5-to-1, wanted to stay independent. They did not want to become employees because they can't just work 2 weeks in a 30 or 60-day window to go buy a new television set, or to save money to put kids through school, or to have a vacation fund. And they don't want to quit their full-time jobs either. Some of them want to have this on the side. So I think we have to respect their freedom and flexibility, but what we're trying to do is to create more value to have them work with Lyft and to get benefits from doing that.
Excellent. Maggie, let me ask a couple last questions because I know we're getting a bit closer here. So first one is actually two questions I'm going to combine, but it's all to do with women in the tech industry. What are the greatest challenges for women entering the tech industry, and how can tech companies address these issues and create more opportunities? What advice do you have for women in tech who want to find an executive sponsor? I think the world is our oyster as women. I don't think we should shy away from tech. And again, there are ways to participate in tech that doesn't require an engineering degree. And that's not to say engineering degrees aren't great. And, there's a lot of women that, with their capabilities, capacities, and their passions should pursue that if that's what they want to do. But I had an economics degree. So I grew up on a different side of the tracks than tech, but my whole career has included tech. And so I think we have to look at from a woman's strength perspective and our intuition and our ability to take a look at technology and how do you apply it to create value in people's lives and livelihoods. Mm-hmm. And I think women are terrific at that. And I think taking jobs where you're in companies where you can lead teams that can do incredible things is something that I think women have an innate capability to do. And at a time where things are in upheaval, that creates opportunity. And and women can get into companies that are fast growth or creating disruption, and that will create opportunities for them to step into. Mm-hmm. With regard to executive sponsors, and I know there's a lot of talk about mentoring and sponsorship. I grew up at a time where, Sheryl Sandberg talks about leaning in. I was like kind of laying on the table, for goodness sake. And, the time that I grew up as a woman in business. And what I learned is you can learn from multiple people. There doesn't have to just be one. And what we should think about is people can sponsor you or mentor you in different ways. And they don't even have to know that's what they're doing. But I also think it's about giving back to people, not just taking from people, and not having it be programmatic, but having it be natural. And one of the things that I've always done, I consider networking working. I've always spent 50 to 60% of my time externally focused, whether that's with customers or suppliers or other executives and leaders or in the boardroom. And I bring those capabilities back to my companies, no matter what position I had. And that's where you can create value
and create power bases. And women don't think about power as being positive, but power is positive. And the way you create that power is by being outside in and inside out, and bringing those outside in perspectives to how you have products and services that can differentiate, that keep customers happy and grow your customer base, and then grow the amount of money that customers pay you. And that puts you in a position where people trust you internally. And they look at you as the hat of the customer or the hat of the partner. And I think we can create those type of environments for ourselves. And I think women just have to give them permission to themselves to do that.
Excellent. A lighter question. You come from a family of sisters like the Wojcicki's, like Susan Wojcicki, CEO of YouTube. And if I remember right, your sister was a former CEO of Campbell's Soup.
Correct.
And the question is, what did your parents do so well to raise both of you?
So my sister Denise, who ran Campbell's Soup for 7 years, and I ran, Frontier for 12. We're the only two siblings ever, male or female, in the Fortune 500. Wow. And we actually overlapped for a number of years in doing that as well. And we're 18 months apart. We're kind of Irish twins. But we both took very different routes to our careers. She went big business the whole way, and I went small entrepreneur, growth, disruption businesses. So the nice thing is we always have had great connectivity because we came at things from different perspectives, but we respect each other so much and love each other so much that we were always there to help each other. But my dad was an executive at AT&T. He had 4 daughters. And my mom, when she was raising us, she took the primary responsibility for that, but she also worked. She was a part-time real estate agent in the state of New Jersey. And she was in the $1 Million Club for, I think, 10 or 12 years in a row when homes were selling for $25,000 a home. So our mothers showed us that you can have work-life balance, you can have a job, you can have your home life, and that, being feminine is good. And having this juggle of both can happen, and you don't have to be perfect at anything. And my dad, when Denise and I were, probably in 6th grade, he started taking us to work with him, like take your daughters to work. We would go to work with him a couple times a year. He worked in New York City. We'd take the train in. We'd spend the day with him. And when he would come home at night from commuting, we had our homework done and we had already eaten, and we would sit at the dinner table with my dad, and he would tell us about his day, and he would tell us about what he was working on. And so he was very open with Denise and I, and actually put things in place for us that sort of changed the way we live, that really carried over to our business career. I'll tell you just a couple of quick things. One is he paid us for performance. We had a job jar that we had to do that he would put jobs in every Saturday. We had to have them done by the following Saturday, or we didn't get our allowance. We learned negotiation skills because Denise and I could trade jobs. And if I didn't like, doing the dishes that week, I could do a trade, and she'd say, okay, well, you have to do 2 loads of laundry instead of just 1. And so we learned negotiation. We started working at a very young age because we knew that if we could, work and make money, we could buy things that we really wanted. We both went to school and went to college and got a good education. And education was really important in our lives, and our parents really taught us that. So, and we were also taught that there's no such thing as failure. It's just you haven't figured it out yet. And that resilience that my parents built into both of us really helped us whenever we had headwinds in our careers or even in our lives.
Wow. I want to meet your parents. That sounds terrific. Yeah. Hey, well, listen, Maggie, let me do this. I always like to finish with a summary of what I took away from the session and let you upgrade it or provide any parting comments. I got, I think, about 6 items that were just standout comments. The first one was your philosophy that sounds like guided you through your whole successful career. Do what it takes to learn, do what it takes to grow, pivot, leverage relationships, a whole kind of combo about learning and growth. That was the first message I got. Second message is the importance of working for disruptors. And disruptors doesn't necessarily mean small companies, but disruptors willing to drive innovation, drive gains, and make sure that those disruptors have got an entrepreneurial spirit. And again, to your point, entrepreneurial spirit doesn't mean you can't be a big company. Matter of fact, you want to build that being in a large organization, that kind of sense of ownership and decentralization, et cetera. Third message I got was about COVID and this new normal. And the idea that, number one, you better be good as a leader at dealing with crisis. And you talked about Costco and how you really have to kind of double down on the safety of your employees, the safety of your customers, and create an environment where they can prosper amidst adversity. And also with COVID, to think about this new normal, that anything can happen at the end of all of this, including where people are based as employees, what the business model looks like, et cetera. And the next item I got was just this broader issue about public policy and business leaders, that there's a growing set of issues that is going to have to be attended to. And the gig worker issue that you described at Lyft was one of those. The issues that California's got with companies that are relocating, but business leaders are going to have to partner and deal with these public policy issues, or they're going to be lose-lose outcomes, lose for companies, lose for governments, et cetera. Another message I got was about diversity, that it's critical to have a pipeline. It's critical to have a breadth of experiences. It's important for women to step forward and not talk themselves out of roles, to believe in themselves, to take those opportunities. And the final takeaway I got, maybe on a lighter note, but it's the power of parenting. And maybe I could expand it, that it's the power of creating an environment where people can succeed. And whether the people are kids or whether they're employees, the importance of role modeling, the importance of incentives, the importance of expectations, the importance of resilience, that power of parenting or leadership that creates a successful environment. Those are the things I got. Upgrades to those, other parting messages?
Yeah, and thank you for that. That was very amazing that you took away those takeaways, because they are really important in my life, at least in my life journey. But I think just a couple of things, like own your own destiny. I think that's really important for all of us to, we're responsible for ourselves, no one else is, and we should own that destiny. Changing and repotting. We all go through phases in our lives where it's time to make changes, and sometimes we stay too long. And sometimes we're afraid of the change, but embrace it. People are the most important asset in our lives and in our companies. It's not technology, it's people, because people will create the best outcomes no matter what they're doing. You have to deliver results. It's not just about talking about it, it's about doing it. And that's what gives you the platform to do a lot of different things in your life. Have courage and take risks. Because that's when we grow the most. Live life by learning and doing for others. I think servant leadership is really key. And then last but certainly not least, enjoy the journey. It's ours to enjoy.
Yeah. God, what wonderful messages, Maggie. You know, I have to compliment you, the breadth of roles that you've had, the breadth of industries, the breadth of challenges you've had, and how that is tied to your feedback about leadership, about how do you create the right culture, about owning things, et cetera. It all comes as a really impressive package. So, Maggie, let me just say a big, big thank you. I learned a huge amount. I know our audience did as well, and I hope we can have you back at UCLA again very soon.
Thank you. Thank you, Terry. And thanks everybody for joining us. Take good care.
Thank you. Take care. Have a great evening.